All right, Azad or Chad, it's 6:10. Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Candace Hector, the Manager of Marketing and Communications here at NIHERST, and I will be your opening moderator. It is indeed a pleasure to once again witness the amalgamation of science, technology, and innovation with a drive towards engendering youth mental health awareness. On behalf of NIHERST and the Women's Roundtable Action Platform of Trinidad and Tobago, WRAPTT, we welcome you to our webinar, How Are Youth? Your participation in this session will undoubtedly prove fruitful as we intend to engage in much needed discussions towards the development of our young people. At this juncture, I wish to invite Mrs. Marley Nord-Lewis, NIHERST President, and Ms. Hazel-Ann McLean, Chair of WRAPTT, to provide remarks.
Mrs. Hazel-Ann McLean, Chair of WRAPTT, Ms. Lovan Superville, Acting Vice President, Science and Technology at NIHERST, our panelists, Mrs. Arlene Hamblin-Paul, Dr. Joanne Spence, Ms. Shireen Mohammed, Mr. Tevon LaRose, Mr. David Bailey, Ms. Brianna Keturah Merritt, our moderator, Ms. Candice Andrews, representatives of NIHERST and WRAPTT, principals, teachers, parents, guardians, and students, stakeholders in mental health awareness. Good evening. On behalf of the National Institute of Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology, NIHERST, I am honored to deliver greetings at today's How Are Youth webinar in collaboration with the Women's Roundtable Action Platform, WRAPTT, oriented towards the promotion of youth mental health awareness in our nation. Please allow me the opportunity to firstly acknowledge the coordinators of this webinar. Thank you for your dedicated effort in organizing such a timely event with this impressive expert panelists who will surely shed some light on this most crucial topic. As a national agency engaged in the development of young people, it is critical for us as well as other relevant stakeholders, to have a deep awareness and understanding of the many obstacles facing youth. We must be cognizant that a myriad of these obstacles are not solely rooted in socio-economic factors. Rather, these challenges are complex and also encompass psychological aspects. One such obstacle that has had a significant impact in recent times is the COVID-19 pandemic. This catastrophic virus caused a global upheaval of all our lives, with far-reaching consequences, particularly for the most vulnerable groups in society, such as youth. Indeed, according to research, the psychosocial effects of COVID-19 disproportionately affect young people, as the pandemic brought with it a wave of changes, causing isolation, fear, uncertainty, sleep disturbance, psychological distress, changes in the delivery of therapeutic services, and almost a complete abrupt halt to their structured daily lives, such as their school schedule, extracurricular pursuits, and their social and recreational activities. The pandemic has caused an increase in the incidence of mood and anxiety disorders, exacerbating specific types of anxiety, including specific phobias, obsessive compulsive disorder, and generalized anxiety related to unpredictable and frightening situations. Now that we have returned to some semblance of normalcy as a nation, following the discontinuation of the pandemic, we cannot neglect the mental health challenges that young people continue to face in the aftermath of COVID-19. A healthy mental state is paramount to setting a strong foundation upon which our young people can work toward achieving their fullest potential. As such, sessions such as this, in which youth can meet with specialists and stakeholders to discuss workable solutions, are as timely as ever. As the national leaders in science, technology, and innovation, NIHERST remains committed to supporting the future leaders of our nation, and as such, we continue to support initiatives such as these that can advance the development of our youth. Many thanks to WRAPTT for partnering with the Institute and answering the call of mental health advocacy for the future leaders of Trinidad and Tobago. I also extend the call to all parents, guardians, teachers, mental health professionals, and other stakeholders to join us in supporting our brilliant young people. I thank you for your time, and I wish us all an excellent, insightful, and meaningful session today. Thank you.
Good day. Thank you for being here. Today, we come together to support you and encourage you, our youth, and let you know that you are not alone. Depression is a real
Okay, so we seem to be having some technical difficulties. Let's just await our ICT team to reload that video. Okay, so good afternoon again. In an effort not to delay today's proceedings, we will pivot to Ms. McLean's pre-recording in a little bit, but I really would like to thank Mrs. Lord Lewis for preparing her remarks, and definitely in terms of what she shared, these are sentiments that certainly lay the framework for today's event. Without further delay, I now introduce to you our moderator who will navigate this evening's healthy discourse. Ms. Candace Andrews is an online event host and youth advocate, holding a practitioner certificate in drama education and a Bachelor's of Arts in Theatre with first-class honors. For the past 5 years, she has been integrating her skills in performing arts to raise individual and community awareness about ways to promote a healthier awareness of self. She has been in the field of performing arts and workshop facilitation for the last 10 years. Her motto, one plants, another one waters, and we feel the impact. We welcome Ms. Andrews to the virtual stage.
Thank you so much, Ms. Hector, and I am so happy and pumped to be here. I am seeing our youth in our midst, and I just want you to put in the chat, I am youth. It doesn't matter your age. This evening, you are youth, and you are the focus of this evening. And before I begin, I just want to send some love and greetings to some persons in our midst. Mrs. Marlene Lord Lewis, the president of NIHERST, Hazel Ann McLean, chair of WRAPTT, Miss Laverne Superville, that's the acting vice president of science and technology for NIHERST, and of course, our lovely panelists, Mrs. Hamble Paul, Dr. Joanne Spence, Miss Charlene C. Mohammed, and we have Mr. Tevon LaRose, Miss Jody Johnson, Mr. David Bailey, and Miss Brianna Merritt. And the last two names, they are our youth representatives on the panel. We cannot have a discussion about youth without having our youth in the midst. And of course, my name is Candace Marie Andrews. I will be your moderator for this evening. I go by the name, the host with the most. I give the most value and I serve the most high. And I will be happy to navigate this evening's discussion. And of course, special thanks to the members and staff of NIHERST and WRAPTT. Of course, we have principals, teachers, parents, guardians, students, and our stakeholders in the mental health awareness arena. So if you are ready for this evening's proceedings, I need you to put a 1 in the chat. That will help me to know that 1, you are hearing me and that you are seeing me as well. So enough about me. I see the ones coming in. We want to introduce our panelists. So this evening, permit me a moment to extend my gratitude for the opportunity to be your moderator for another installment of How Are Youth? This event is one that has been met with great anticipation. I think it goes without saying that an initiative such as this, it is pertinent as the youth today aim to progress through life. Now, this session, among other things, is specifically geared towards increasing awareness among the youth of the realities of mental health and mental illness issues, and of course, removing the stigma that often prevents them from seeking help, as well as including professional voices like our panelists in the conversation and providing actionable expert answers, of course, support. And of course, this evening, we want to gather some strategies for coping. With this in mind, I would like to introduce our panelists and welcome them center stage, or should I say center screen, as we set the scene for this evening's proceeding dealing with anxiety and depression, of course, in the context of post-COVID. Firstly, we have Mrs. Arlene Hamble Paul. Please give us a wave. And of course, she has been 29 years an educator and a graduate from the LaGuardia Community College, and that is in New York. She became the first female Trinidadian paramedic to work in Trinidad and Tobago. She is currently an adjunct lecturer at the Siparani Labor College and has tutored in criminology at the University of the West Indies. Of course, she majors in several areas, including emergency medical services, psychology, sociology, criminology, and criminal justice and education. Of course, she is an advocate for youth. And in 2009, she founded the organization Anointed Sons International, an organization focused on the development of at-risk male youth. She believes that purpose is directly connected to serving others. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, please put your virtual hands together for Miss Arlene Hamble-Paul. And of course, next we would like to introduce Dr. Joanne Spence. Dr. Spence is a behavior change consultant and chief consultant at the Therapeutic Assessment and Training Center. She obtained a PhD in leadership with an emphasis in criminal justice system from the Oxford Graduate School and an MSc and a BSc from the University of the West Indies. She is currently the head of the social work department of the Caribbean Nazarene College with a portfolio spanning 25 years of experience and training in the areas of human capacity development and training. Dr. Spence was inducted into the Oxford Society of Scholars and is a research fellow. She serves on the cabinet-appointed committee to review SEA, and of course, she is on the board of directors at WRAPTT. Please let us introduce none other than Dr. Spence. Yes. Give us a wave, give us a wave. And of course, in our midst, we have Miss Shireen C. Muhammad. Miss Muhammad is a passionate practitioner in the field of psychology. And of course, she's qualified as an applied psychologist with over 7 years of hands-on experience, of course, in the mental health arena. And she has gained her bachelor's in psychology with a special at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, and her master's in applied psychology at the London Metropolitan University, and that is in the United Kingdom. She's also a certified grief practitioner. And of course, she is very responsible for the program psychologist for the Ministry of Labor. That's the on-the-job training division. She provides level 1 support and intervention services for OJT trainees, and she's assisting in the developing their ability to establish positive coping mechanisms and strategies in managing emotional and behavioral issues impacting their performance and well-being during their period of training. Please put your virtual hands together and welcome the lovely Miss Muhammad. Thank you so much for being here with us. And how can we have discussion without the male presence? I would like to focus on our panelist, Mr. Tevon LaRose. And of course, he's a passionate educator with over 14 years of experience, and he is committed to the development of others. He is also a secondary school teacher at his alma mater, Trinity College. And of course, he teaches principles of business, management of business, and entrepreneurship. He received his master's degree in management from the Troy University. And of course, that's in Alabama in the US. And he's a former second vice president of the Secondary Schools Football League and currently a North Zone representative of the same. He is an ordained minister with a burning passion for helping youth, especially the male youth, to fulfill their potential and become lifelong learners while positively contributing to society. He is also a football referee where he officiates many youth games in Trinidad. He is married with one daughter and is an avid fan of Liverpool Football Club and American football. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, put your hands together as we welcome Mr. LaRose. Joining our team this evening, we have none other than Miss Jody Johnson. She's a secondary school social worker for the past 9 years. Miss Johnson strongly believes that helping her child today will help prevent a broken adult tomorrow. In her role as a school social worker, Miss Johnson provides comprehensive support and services to the students by addressing any barriers that may be impacting their social, emotional, academic, and physical needs. Ms. Johnson is also a local government counselor in the San Juan Lavantil Regional Corporation for the past 10 years. And one major focus in this capacity is on community social work, where residents can feel integrated and empowered to improve, develop, and change their communities and circumstances. Please welcome Miss Johnson, ladies and gentlemen. Give us a wave. And coming on board are two youth representatives, Mr. David Bailey and Miss Brianna Merritt, and they can give us a wave as well. Mr. Bailey, a recent UE graduate in the field of computer science, is currently employed in the Trinidad technology industry. And Miss Merritt, she is only 19 years old, an upper form 6 science student at the San Juan South Secondary School. On behalf of NIHERST and WRAPTT, I and all of us welcome our panelists. Let's give them a round of applause and put 2 in the chat if you are happy that they are here to share their wealth of knowledge. So, without further ado, we're going to jump right into things. So in this primary session, we aim to address the burning questions that surround the impacts, effects, and possible solutions that relate to anxiety and depression in our post-pandemic era. But before we get into the questions, I want to ask each panelist to just finish this sentence for me. And what this is going to do is to give our online viewers a chance to put their questions in. And of course, to stimulate the conversation this evening, because I believe it's going to be an impacting one. So I'm going to share the prompt with you. So you're going to share with us, when I think of mental health, I think of, let me repeat that. When I think of mental health, I think of, and I want us to start with Mr. LaRose. You can start us off and call another name of the panelists to continue. So that is, when I think of mental health, I think of.
When I think of mental health, I think of enjoying life. I think about having positive relationship with persons in your family as well as those outside of your close remit, and living a very fruitful life going forward and contributing well to society. So I turn about to Ms. Shireen Mohammed.
Add into that very comprehensive thing. When I think of mental health, I think of hope. That's my favorite word. It's the word that I like to use and to keep dear to me when I interact with anyone, especially my clients. It is hope. So when I think of mental health, I think of hope. And I'm going to turn it over to the person that I can see immediately, which is Ms. Arlene Hamblin-Paul.
When I think of mental health, I think about living a full life peacefully. So that peace that passeth all understanding that we know of. So when I think of mental health, I think of peace, because it's a place where we can rest, we are able to function effectively, and to be able to bless others with our peace as we go about our daily duties. Thank you.
You have to pass it on to someone.
Yes, I'm looking. Jody Johnson.
Hi, when I think of mental health, I think about how I feel or how people feel good emotionally and how they get through their day functioning in a good, happy, joyous, your mental health and well-being. So I think of mental health as a good feeling good in oneself and one's skin.
And who would you like to add to this definition that we are building?
I will go on to Dr. Joanne Spence.
When I think of mental health, I think of balance in life. I think of peace. I think of happiness. I think of just being able to relax and enjoy life. Because I believe that many times we work so hard and we don't really put balance. So when I think of mental health, I think about balancing our lives and ensuring that we have some area where we can really relax and enjoy it. Yes. Did Mr. Tevon go there? Mr. LaRose? Oh, yes, he was first.
Yes, I was first.
Let me see who I can. Okay, so Candace. I see Candace smiling away.
Oh, you want to bring me
Candace,
in?
no. Yeah, Candace, yeah, please share with us.
Okay, when
Yeah.
I think of mental health, I think of our men who need support and need love and attention and respect. So I want to pass over to our another male, Mr. Bailey himself.
Thanks. When I think about mental health, I think about reflection, specifically like self-reflection, being able to feel how you feel and know what that feeling means to you. And I would pass it on to my other youth group, Brianna.
Thank you. My take on mental health is pretty similar to Mrs. Spence's take on mental health. When I think of mental health, it's just the ability to be just at peace and free, not stressed, not worried, just calm, you know? So yeah, I think that's everybody.
Yes, I believe so.
That's everybody? Okay.
I believe so. Everybody, we went, right? So that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. And of course, this is an opportunity for our audience to drop it in the chat for us. When you think of mental health, what do you think of? And I want to jump right into our first question. And the first question, and I want to address it to three persons. First, that will be Ms. Spence, Mr. Bailey, and Ms. Mohammed. I want to direct these questions specifically to you. What are some of the common symptoms of anxiety and depression that people may experience after COVID-19, since we are talking about this context?
Anyone
Well,
of us can go first?
Yeah, sure.
I don't know if that show was referring to me or Mr. Tevon.
Yes, so I believe David shot at it first, so he can go followed by Ms. Spence and then Ms. Mohammed.
Okay, gotcha.
Okay, nice. Well, can you say the question one more time?
Sure. So the question is, what are some common symptoms of anxiety and depression that people may experience after the COVID-19?
Okay, well, a feeling of overwhelmingness, you feel out, now coming out of COVID-19, you were inside for so very long, so many things you couldn't do, and like having the ability to do them, you feel a little overwhelmed. You want to do everything one time. You want to kind of balance. You want to do this one time. You want to go out. You want to spend most of the time out. Not having a certain kind of, not striking a balance with yourself. So, and that leads to getting really drained. So I guess people tend to overindulge and feel drained because of lacking that for nearly 2 years now.
Interesting. Ms. Spence, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so for me, signs of depression, prolonged periods of unhappiness. And I said prolonged because at times we see persons sad and they may feel depressed or so, but we're talking prolonged periods before we really deem them as depressed. Changes in appetite, sleep patterns, so a series of things would happen. Restlessness, difficulty concentrating, emotionally, people withdraw from friends, they have suicidal thoughts. And these are some of the things that would happen. And what we have to look at is what happened on a consistent basis, not something happened when, okay, today I'm sad, I just don't feel to go out. That would not determine a depressed person. But when we have prolonged periods of these signs of this withdrawal from friends, this feeling
to do some self-harm, that restlessness, the sleep patterns have changed, and you're just feeling unhappy and irritable. Those are some of these signs that we find would determine a depressed person. During the COVID period, we found that persons were inside for a long period of time. Their lifestyle has been different from what they're accustomed to, and they would have resorted to just the phone, using the phone to communicate. And that was not sufficient. We needed to have that physical contact. That would have contributed a lot to depression. So that's my thoughts on depression, signs of depression.
Indeed. Thank you so much. Ms. Mohammed, do you feel the same way? What do you have to add?
Well, definitely. I mean, well, Dr. Spence spoke about depression. So speaking on the anxiety aspect of it, that's definitely something that has affected persons during the pandemic and well before the pandemic, and even more so now. Anxiety is something that is natural and normal for each and every one of us. It has a self-preservation. It has an essential component in it in terms of helping us to keep safe. The challenge is when anxiety becomes too much. So it's like having a light switch, but we have to, be able to turn off that light switch. That light switch isn't meant to stay on all the time. And so with anxiety, it's dealing with excessive worry. It may be worrying about things that have happened. So for persons during the pandemic, they were worrying about the life they had, and now they had to lock down and they couldn't see friends and do all those things. And it's also worrying about what next. That future that has not even happened as yet. So anxiety is very diverse, where people kind of get lost in the past too much, or too much into the future that has not even happened as yet. So it's always critical for us to be mindful of keeping those clients grounded in the present. It's also important when understanding anxiety that it is triggered by a feeling or the presence of some threat. And that can be real or it can be imagined, and it will have the same response. And so persons will experience things like restlessness, similar to what Dr. Spence said about depression. Irritability as well, because remember, you're agitated, you're wondering what is happening, this constant looking over your shoulder type of feeling. You're going to experience physical symptoms as well, that sort of bubble in your stomach, or the butterflies in your stomach, as they call it. Sometimes people get headaches, like tension headaches, nausea, muscle tension. Sometimes you tremble, you sweat. Speaking in front of a crowd, all of those things you can experience as well. Why? Because anxiety is a natural and normal thing for all of us. You also may experience things like sleep disturbances, changes in your appetite, etc., not being able to focus. One of the critical things, I think, in linking it back to the pandemic, what is so critical is that in understanding anxiety and why it can be very much detrimental to persons, is anxiety is linked to our need for agency. And agency speaks to, we all have this need to feel in control of our lives in terms of the things that we do, the decisions we make, the choices. And COVID-19 took away a lot of that for many of us. One, we didn't have a manual of how to deal with the pandemic, how to deal with COVID. And so that sense of agency, that sense of control would have been disrupted for people of, how do I manage this? I don't know. I don't have a reference point. So COVID-19 definitely has been a key factor in terms of persons' anxiety levels and increasing the instances of anxiety people have experienced. Now that we are in the post-pandemic era, it doesn't mean that persons' anxiety has decreased.
Indeed, indeed. And I love that there's a narrative amongst the panelists, this issue of isolation. And I don't know about you, but I am an extrovert and I felt the effects of the isolation. And I want to welcome those who have just joined us. You are in for a treat. Thank you for joining the conversation. We are talking about mental health. And of course, the second question that I want to ask, and I want to target it to Arlene, Brianna, Mr. LaRose and Ms. Johnson. I want the four of you all to tackle this question. The question is, how does the experience of this same isolation and social distancing during the pandemic contribute to the anxiety and depression levels found in persons today?
I'd like to jump right in there, Candice.
Go right ahead.
During the pandemic, that isolation that youth would have experienced would have caused them to come to a place where they want to socialize but were unable to socialize. Some of them would have been transcending from one developmental stage to the next, where socialization is a part of your growth. And within that almost 2-year period, there was that lack of interaction. So coming out of that, being able to socialize with others may cause some anxiety. So they may be a little timid as to how do I respond? How do I react? Because when you left for the pandemic, when the pandemic happened, you were at standard, let's say standard 4, but when you are allowed to socialize again, you are now in Form 1. And likewise, you may have been in standard 5 and now you're back out and you're going into Form 2. And so that transmission from that age group to the next can or would be causing a lot of anxiety within the school systems. Now we're seeing where the socialization among the young people it's different to the time before because of that lack of interaction. It's as if they are lacking in skills, and we have to be patient with them and guide them along as they develop.
Nice. Thank you for that contribution. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah, so, oh, sorry.
It's okay, it's okay. I would like to chime in. My response to that question is pretty similar to Mrs. Arlene's response, just that adapting to that new environment, especially with online schooling, everyone adapts differently, some quicker than some slower than some. So that whole adjusting to being away from your friends, away from teachers, going to school online creates that anxiety because some people don't know if they can or if them adjusting to it would be like the best, if they can learn better that way. So that would create some type of anxiety, and depression can come in terms of schooling online. Some people grades may drop, that can create depression. So yes, that's my response to that question.
Wow, sounds like a lot of emotions happening amongst the youth, especially being hit by this pandemic. So we have Mr. LaRose and we have Ms. Johnson left to
thank you. So I'll come in at this point because I work in the school system. So we would have seen that transition being really a challenge for students who would have come into secondary school for the first time in Form 1 or Form 2. Also taking what you said, Candice, some of our children were already extroverts, already out there doing extracurricular activities, their football, their socialization, different clubs, maybe cultural or sports. And for 2 years, they were put down from doing things like that. So now they are coming back into this environment. In my environment, they're coming into a new environment, transitioning from primary school into secondary school. We also have to watch their developmental stage where they would have left the world before COVID as children, and they are now coming in as teenagers, where their needs and their socialization will be different from when they were at standard 2, standard 3, standard 4 coming up. So yes, we saw that anxiety coming in there, like how to balance, especially if you came from an all-girls school or all-boys school, and now you're in a mixed school, that socialization in there, as well as whatever the families may have gone through on an individual level during that 2 years, maybe loss of jobs, debts, all of these things coming out of that. These children are now coming back into an environment where they have to trust the space, trust the people that are there after coming home, coming out from home, which they were locked down in and secured in, but yet trauma still came in through different forms and fashion. And they're out here now trying to balance what they dealt with in that 2 years, what they are dealing with presently, and what is expected of them as students back after COVID. So the anxiety is there for some, just the fact of a new school, a new environment, and of course, the needs have changed from online learning back into the physical classroom. That alone was traumatic for some children coming back in because their parents passed on that. Like, I don't want my child come to school, there's still COVID out there. And they put that fear as well, or that anxiety into their children. So we know where parents were were up for homeschooling, just not to put their children back out into the world to exist there with COVID. So yes, I saw that really affecting our students coming back into the system after being away for 2 years and being away from their friends and all the different social activities that they would have generally and normally functioned in prior to COVID.
Wow. Thank you so much, Ms. Johnson, for that. And of course, parents and teachers listening in, this is good feedback because now you could understand the mind of the child who has to make this transition. And Mr. LaRose, I know you work with young people, especially outdoors and on the football field. And of course, we will lock down for a particular period of time. What do you have to say to this as well?
Okay, as an educator, first thing I have to say is that the lockdown forced parents to become teachers. And they were the ones who were the main educators of the children for 2 years. And one thing it did is that it allowed parents to see what teachers go through on a regular basis, just dealing with their children alone. That the impact of educating the child, making sure the child is of a good state of mind and all that stuff, what a teacher has to do on a regular basis with the 30, 40 children. A parent had to go through that for about 2 years. So that trauma of a parent now learning how to teach a child that he has not done probably for 10, 20, 30 years, have to sit down and teach a child over an online system which the parent was not trained for. Neither the child was not trained for. That itself was a very traumatic experience for some. Then the fact that many parents do not have the access to get a device, a learning device. We see the government made many attempts to make sure that students got at least one device per home. Remember, some parents have 4, 5, 6 children. You can't afford to get a device for each child. So they may have been sharing of devices during this COVID pandemic. Therefore, there was some sort of education loss for a child who may not have had the ability to get a device. Then post-COVID, you're looking at parents being afraid, as Jody said, concerning bringing their children out to school. If there's a virus that is going around, for example, a simple flu or cold, parents become very concerned because they're afraid to send their children out. If they hear that one of the children in the class is sneezing or coughing, that has caused anxiety as well. Then you look at the impact of the phone. Remember, during COVID, the main communicator for all children and parents were devices. You had children using their phones for educational purposes, for entertainment. So they were not trained to use the phones for education, neither entertainment, neither parents. Then we went to a hybrid system where we had students coming out for some time. The SEA kids came out just before exam. The CXC and CAPE children came out also just before exam to familiarize themselves with the environment they've been away for a while. That caused anxiety because they came out during a period where we were still under COVID restrictions. So a lot of parents were concerned, parents were afraid to have their children do exams, and that fear of the parents transferred onto the children. And then you had the period where we have now been fully integrated into face-to-face learning again. But the children have gone through so many different experiences over the 2 years: online learning, hybrid learning, parents teaching, teachers teaching online, no communication, physical interaction with your teachers, SBs and all these projects were done online, and now you bring it to a face-to-face environment. Then my part that I'm concerned about was the non-interaction of children on the field. You see, sport is very critical to a child. The child know their body. It's good for physical health, good for mental health, exercising, camaraderie, and all the things that sports bring. That was taken away for 2 years. So now, even you can see at a national level, all our teams are kind of behind where they're supposed to be because of that lack. All our national teams are not performing the way they should because of that lack of experience for the last 2 years. And this has caused the administrators to try to find novel ways of dealing with it, and it has also impacted our young people because they're the ones now trying to catch up to Jamaica and all the other islands that have gone past in terms of how they handle COVID to how we handle COVID. So that's my take on the area of sport especially.
Thank you so much. And what I've been hearing coming out from the panelists is this idea of not just getting affected by learning loss, but also social loss, and socialization is part of our learning experience as well. And in this first session, we have time for about 2 more questions. The last question, everyone will be able to answer with a particular statement that comes to mind for them. But this next question, I want to target it to Ms. Spence, Ms. Arlene, and Ms. Mohammed. The 3 of you all, I want you all to target this question. Now, during the pandemic, especially during the lockdown, we know that men are social beings as well. They need to go out, they need to hang out, they need to be on the field, they need to be doing physical labor and not just cooped up in a house. And we realized that there was this built up anger that parents were experiencing in the home, because now they had the extra pressure of becoming the teacher, which is a hat that they probably didn't have to wear for some time. So I want to find out from you, is there a direct link between anger or the mismanagement of coping with managing anger and emotions to the holistic development of mental health? What is the correlation or the relationship between anger or the mismanagement of emotions and this issue of our mental health?
Who's going for this?
You can go first. You started it off.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
All right. So anger, when we talk about anger, we're talking about is expressed frequently. It's intense. And many times people feel that anger, something is wrong if you're angry. It's quite okay to be angry. What we need to do is to be able to control and don't get it out of control. And that's important to understand. So anger is fine. It's uncontrolled anger can lead to serious problems. What we find, and I'm going to go right into the scenario you use where men were at home and felt locked up inside because they couldn't really go out, and you're talking about the correlation between that staying in the school and becoming angry. Now, for men especially, if you're talking men usually like to go out and socialize. Women might stay home, chat with friends on the phone, do housework, whatever. But men are different type in terms of most men would like to go out. They like to socialize outside of the home. So whether it's in the football field, whether it's in the club, whether it's in the bar, wherever it is, they like that and they get accustomed to that. And that's where they release some of their stress. That's where they release some of the anger that is built up. So when we have persons who are unable to go out, and that's why, if you remember, during the COVID, people were going into bars and locking themselves in bars because they felt that they needed to have this way of expressing themselves. They needed to have that freedom where they can just come out, drink, lime, whatever it is, just to release that anger, to release that stress. And for them, that is what they do to release it. So they found themselves locking themselves in bars, in clubs, just to be able to drink and spend the whole night. And that period of time was where they were releasing the stress. Now, when somebody stay inside and they're not getting the opportunity to release it, and for them, that's their coping mechanism. So they're releasing it through the bar, the rum shop, whatever it is. And that's their coping mechanism. Now, if they're unable to do that, you find that at home, they start to express the anger in different ways. And we have seen, research has shown that there was an increase in domestic violence during the COVID period. A number of persons, I have that experience as a practitioner, where more persons have been coming because of domestic violence situations, because of other, whether it is abuse, physical abuse and so on. And it happened because they had no way to deal with that pent-up anger. So definitely there's that correlation where we can talk about anger, the coping mechanisms in terms of, okay, so what has COVID done? Or how has it contributed to persons expressing their anger, being more angry, become saying that it's okay to be angry. But when we're talking about uncontrolled, where we're having domestic violence increase, there is a problem. And definitely the research has shown that, yes, there has been an increase in domestic violence. There has been an increase in other physical type of abuse and so on. during the COVID period. So definitely people have to find ways and means of addressing the anger that built up because you're home and you're having a lot of problems in terms of, okay, I'm not working presently. For some persons, they may have still had their salaries, and for some, they may not have had. For some persons, having to deal with children at home, I can tell you, having to deal with children at home in school and online schooling was very difficult for some parents who have no idea of how to teach, and they had to do most of the teaching. Those things could, of course, persons to become angry because they're unable to control the situation they're facing. And therefore, they became angry. There was no outlet, and it caused problems after. I can go on and on, but let me allow somebody else to speak.
Thank you so much for shedding light on that. We can go right over to Ms. Mohammed.
Thank you so much. And agreed, anger is a normal emotion. And those are sometimes my favorite words you'll always hear me saying in a session. It's normal, it's natural. Anger is a normal emotion that each of us has. But when it becomes a problem is when we do not manage that anger, when we do not manage and express that emotion effectively. So it's okay for us to experience the emotion, whether it's a positive emotion or a negative emotion. What makes it challenging, especially when it comes to linking it back to our mental health, what makes it challenging is in terms of how we actually manage that emotional response. Is it that we allow ourselves to express and manage it healthily in terms of assertive communication, conflict resolution, problem solving skills? Or is it that we manage it unhealthily in terms of those outbursts, the things that we can see, resentment, arguing, and violence, as Dr. Spence spoke about, which indeed was something that has been noticed during that COVID-19 time, where there was an increase in gender-based violence happening because persons were locked down and not sure how to manage their frustrations dealing with that issue. It can be very difficult for persons. I think also when you're linking it back to men, what is something we have to be mindful of as well is socialization and how men are socialized from babes come up in terms of the expression of emotions. So growing up, it's easy for women to validate and express their emotions. It's okay. But when it comes to our men, when it comes to our boys, what are the things we generally see? Toughen up. Big man like you crying, boys don't cry, and all of those things. So when we teach our boys, our young men, how do we expect them to manage their negative emotions in a healthy way? So it's really important for us to pay attention to how small things add up into bigger things when it comes to this. It's also important, I think, when you're looking at anger, that anger is not the sole determinant of poor mental health, but it definitely is a contributor, particularly if it is not managed effectively. So if persons are not able to manage situations, manage their expressions of anger effectively, it is going to increase stress levels. It is going to increase situations where you're having fallout, so interpersonal relationship challenges. You're going to be getting into a lot of conflict situations, and that can be very stressful for persons. So with that increased stress happening because of anger, that's absolutely going to negatively affect a person's mental health as well. So it's really important, that we normalize anger as an emotion. We normalize also positive, healthy ways for expressing anger in terms of communicating. And when someone is communicating, that we are compassionate, we are kind, we are responsible in our responses, and that we really check ourselves in terms of not adopting those stereotypes that shut people down and shut them up.
Indeed. Indeed, and we don't want to shut anybody up. We want persons to be heard. Miss Arlene Hamble-Poor, what do you have to add to this conversation?
Right, so I'm glad that I'm coming on the heels of the two very astute professionals. What I want to hone in on is the young male youth. So we spoke a lot about the adult male, and I want to hone in on the young male. As Mr. LaRose would have indicated, it's outdoors. They love outdoors. And Shireen just spoke about us raising them in a particular way. So let's picture the situation where young men are forced, based on circumstance, to be in the home. when there was a little ease, or even when there was not, there were young men still taking that opportunity or that chance, as we might say, to go out to the football field, to go out to the park, that kind of thing. But you live in a home where parents would tell you, this is my home and you do as I say. So in doing that, there was a level of anger that may have welled up inside of them. But you're in my house. You can't express anger, as Shireen said. You have to be able to act in a way as you were taught. So you're in this household, you're angry, you're unable to express. So it's unexpressed anger or suppressed anger. And that in itself could lead to anxiety and depression. So we may have seen behaviors in young men, different, and probably a parent may tell another parent, since COVID, he's acting up, and he feels he's a man in here. But it's not that. It's really the symptoms of what they've been experiencing. And in terms of that anger, not being able to express, you can't go out and you're angry, not sure who you're angry at, but you're angry, not being able to express and not being able to vent or even to speak to the parent, because our parental structure is a little bit authoritarian at times, and that can lead or could have led to the anxiety and depression, and can be still manifesting itself now, as we are seeing within our society.
Indeed. So I'm hearing we need to get back to fostering trust, this space of safety, and not locking up persons, but letting them express, because only when they express, we are able to use that as a reference point to help them. So final question as we wrap up session 1. You all have been doing great. Everyone, I want you to share with us your top 1 coping mechanism for dealing with fear and anxiety post-pandemic, starting with Mr. Bailey. And after you share, call somebody's name and let's pop like popcorn.
My number 1 coping mechanism is I count to 3. So whatever I need to do, I count to 1, 2, 3, and do it. Nothing else.
Okay, you call someone's name?
Yeah, Mr. Lewis.
I depend on my spiritual background. So, as a Christian, I'm a Christian by spiritual background. So there are scripture verses I depend on to bring that comfort. For example, one is God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of power, love, and a sound mind. And I would rehearse that until that sense of calm returns, until I'm normal, feeling, in a good place again. Miss Arlene Hamblin-Port.
Right. And so as a Christian myself, my go-to is worship. I put on my worship music and engulf myself there. And if possible, and I can go out and exercise, for those of you who know of me, I will get out there and exercise. I do some training, but worship is my go-to. Dr. Spence. You're still muted.
Sorry about that. Yes. So as a Christian also, one of the things that I do is listen to gospel music. So I would put on music and just relax, listening to the music, talking to God. That's the way I find my peace and so, yes. Who should I call? Charlene or Shireen Mohammed, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Spence. So what I think is an excellent coping strategy, and it's something that persons should all aim to adopt and practice, whether you are struggling or not. So while you're driving and you're in traffic, focus on your breathing. Your breath is so powerful, it's so important. And once you're alive, you have breath. So use that. And it's a very quick, easy technique that you can use when it comes to focusing on your breathing, particularly when it comes to managing anxious thoughts. And it is a 3-6 technique. So with that technique, you want to inhale for a count of 3, hold for 1, and exhale for a count of 6. Why that is so critical is because when you are inhaling, you're activating your heart, your blood is pumping, all of that thing that's good. But when you're exhaling, you're activating your parasympathetic nervous system. That is critical. That is vital in terms of rest and relaxation. So if you are feeling anxious, remember you are feeling that you are threatened, you're feeling you're in danger. You want to activate that part of the fight and flight system that is responsible to say, hey, you're okay, you're safe, there's no immediate danger. Of course, if there's immediate danger, you want to be able to move and to respond. But that 3-6 technique is very powerful, and learning to train our breath is critical for each and every one of us when it comes to our mental health, and particularly for managing anxiety. I'm going to pass it on to Brianna Merritt.
Thank you, Miss. My coping mechanism is definitely praying, talking to God, whatever the issue is, whatever I'm feeling, whatever I may be going through. I call on the Lord or take it to Him in prayer, and my problems are gone. Fine, no issues. So that's definitely my coping mechanism. And I would like to call on Miss Jody Johnson.
Thank you. My coping mechanism too will be prayer. That's my first coping mechanism. As Brianna said, take it to the Lord in prayer. Lay your burdens down there. And self-talk. Self-talk is important to me, that you have this, you got this, you know your purpose, you know you have to get through this, you will get through this, you're strong enough. I self-talk a lot. And again, you're counseling young people. So if you have to get them to a space, you also have to be in that space as well. So music, prayer, and self-talk works for me. So Candace, you'll wrap it up with what you do.
All right. For me, it would be getting into outdoors. God has given us nature to be calm and to soothe the mind. So getting into outdoors, and I know Arlene goes Bamboo Cathedral. I went on the public holiday, and of course I'm in pain, but thank God I don't have to walk around in this event. So thank God for that. So yes, so the key is be angry, but sin not. And of course we are advocating prayer, we're advocating breathing, we're advocating self-talk. So at this juncture, we wish to pause for pause so you all could grab some water, take a breath. And of course, we want to spotlight Miss Cindy Andrews. She's going to do a spoken word piece, and she's a youth advocate with a spokesperson for mental health within our young people. Let us stay tuned to the screen as we welcome Miss Cindy Andrews.
How are youth doing? Life is unpredictable and overwhelming. Every day, youth navigate the demands of school, family, and social life in an ever-changing world with a pandemic, climate change and global warming, crime, violence, and poverty. Each youth may respond to their environment and its challenges differently, but do you stop to check and see how youth are doing? It is said that the youth is the future, but how is our care and development in the present? Often, our mental and emotional care and well-being is overlooked if there isn't a physical explanation for why we may be feeling unwell. It seems that they do not care to hear about it or pay attention to the way our mental health affects our well-being. The youth are often told that we are being lazy when we may be burnt out or experiencing fatigue, chastised for lack of productivity when we may be experiencing performance anxiety, described as disrespectful or rude when we do not comply, and punished when we have challenges regulating and expressing our feelings of stress and anxiousness and frustration. Youth are exposed to so much information on social media and in real time, bombarded with doom and gloom or ideas that our way, health, image, and lives need to look and be perfect. Youth fear missing out, succumb to peer pressure and bullying, or isolate ourselves. We face the pressures to achieve and accomplish. Let's stop, pause, reflect. Today, take a moment to check in on youth. How can you help youth with our mental health? Consider, how is life affecting us? Start by listening. Ask how youth are feeling. Ask, what is youth thinking?
Yes. Thank you so much, Miss Andrews. Of course, that felt weird. Thank you, Miss Andrews. Thank you, Cindy Andrews, for that amazing piece. And we want to find out this evening, what are youth thinking? What are you thinking at this moment in time? And before we go into our second session, if you want a chance to win some great prizes, put in the chat WIN, win. Let me see those wins. WIN. We're going to check in with you all, and we also want you to win in this life. So before we proceed to our second session, we have the opportunity for you to participate in this poll. So it's up on the screen, and you are going to win some amazing prizes. Some Amazon gift cards are on the inside. So let's see if you were paying attention. Questions like, what is anxiety? What are 3 signs of depression? We want to find out if you were listening to our panelists. I believe this is the end of our quiz. Congratulations. The top 3 persons are going to win Amazon gift cards. And of course, we want you to be educated. We want you to have everything that you need to win. So the team in the background would let you know who the winners were. And thank you so much for participating in this. Wow, wow, wow. The energy is buzzing. And it's not too late to share the link with a friend, with a neighbor, with the police as well. They need to be informed. And we want to jump right into session 2. Somebody put 2 in the chat if you are ready. Somebody put 2 in the chat if you are ready. And thank you for participating. And those winners will be announced via email. So at this time, we would like to open the curtains to session 2 of the webinar, and we are looking at bad behaviors, the often miscategorized mental health issues. So coming out of this webinar, it is our aim that strategies are shared to engage our youth in sharing their experiences, as well as expressing their emotions about dealing with the post-pandemic stressor of anxiety. And of course, in its many forms, so that we would be able to encourage and empower and inspire those who are still navigating this post-pandemic. So in the light of this, I wish to pose the first question to one of our mental health professionals, that's Dr. Joanne Spence. And the first question is, what relationship? Yes, we asked this question before, but I want to ask you the second question. We targeted it in the first session. So I want to find out, what are some common mental health issues that can manifest as quote unquote bad behavior?
Okay. What are common? Sorry, let me hear it again.
Okay, sure. What are some common mental health issues that can manifest itself as being labeled as bad behavior?
Okay, so anxiety disorder, I think, is one you can look at. Persons who are anxious, and we're talking children here, who may behave in particular ways. So their anxiety in the classroom would cause them to be out of their seat often. You find them interfering with other children. So they're always doing things to disrupt the class. And because they're doing that, people say, oh, those children are just miserable. They call them deviant. They find all sort of names for those children. And those children may be suffering from anxiety disorder, where because of the anxiety, they cannot stay still. They're always engaged in some sort of behavior that may be disrupting other persons in the classroom, and therefore they are misdiagnosed. One of the things that I find also is a lot of parents would bring their children and say the teacher said that the child has ADHD, and that's one of the things that is misdiagnosed. You bring your child might be behaving different, and especially during the COVID, children adjusting to the new, some children going out of school for the first time after COVID, and I'm talking about going out to school for the first time because they may have started school with online classes. And when they started school, the whole settling down was a period for them. They're still exploring and so on. And because they were not sitting and just behaving as the teacher expected them to behave, the teachers were diagnosing them, which what they're not supposed to do, but they were saying, okay, send your child, he or she has ADHD. That is often misdiagnosed. Those are children who may, because of other circumstances, it may not just be settling down, it may be other problems they may be having at home, problems with learning and so on. And those problems may be related to some conditions at home and not necessarily a situation with the child, where the child is ill or has some mental disorder. All right, so we have to be able to determine whether there's something that many times when children act, they act as a reaction to something. And we often misdiagnose them because we feel that, okay, they're just disruptive, they're just delinquent and so on. But many times they're reacting based on some action that took place. All right, so I'll leave it to somebody else to share again, further share on it.
Okay, so and I'm happy that you brought that up, and I'm curious to find out from Mr. LaRose, in your interaction, especially with the male youth, what are some of the misconceptions around them being affected by the pandemic and being labeled as a bad child or having displayed bad behavior? What were some of the misconceptions circulating around this issue?
Well, the main issue is that the child is not adjusted to classroom setting. That the child should be taken out of the classroom setting because he cannot behave, he's impacting those around him, and there should be some form of punishment that should be given to either cause the child to come in line with the behavior that you desire, or to try to get him to conform to some level of normalcy, quote unquote, based on what the classroom setting is, based on who the teacher is, by the way. What I would always like to say, and I'll follow on the doctor, is that there's an African proverb that says, when a man falls, don't show me where he fell, show me where he tripped. And usually when we look at young men, a lot of the issues that we face as teachers usually stem from the home. So I had a principal who said the trinity of education is the parent, child, and teacher. And many times the students who give a lot of issues are those whose parents we hardly see, whose parents are only involved probably once a year, which is parent-teachers meeting, or when the child is in trouble and the parent has to come to school, then we see the child and the parent being presented. On the other hand, the children that we see the least issues from, and even those that we see issues from but that are managed better, are those whose parents are involved. They call, they check on the child, they show up unexpectedly, they are in contact with the teachers, especially form teachers, and they take a great interest in their son's co-curricular activities. So you see them in karate, you see them in the football, you see them in the rugby, cheering the child on. And we see a difference in those children compared to the children whose parents we hardly see.
Right, wow. And talking about children form a vital fabric of our society. And Ms. Johnson, in your experience, what do you think society and all of us, what do you think we can do to address this stigma of the bad behavior and help instead of hurt? I believe you're muted. Let me see if I can help you out here to unmute you. You're still muted. I'm not sure what's happening. Maybe our tech team can help. I'll come back to you, Ms. Johnson. I want Mr. Bailey, Brianna, and Arlene to address this answer. What is your role, both positive and negative stigmas play, especially the bad behavior child, in this whole issue, and how can we deal with it?
Now, I want to approach it from, of course, my area, which is the youth perspective. Over the years, I have worked through the NGO at the Youth Training Center and seen boys who were categorized as beyond control, coming out of St. Michael's Home for Boys and being placed at the Youth Training Center because, quote unquote, they were unable to behave. Now, again, as Dr. Spence would have mentioned, there is always a story behind this story, and Mr. LaRosse confirmed that in talking about show me where, you know, it started. Now, young men, especially within this system, are labeled as beyond control, as beyond help, so to speak, and they are lumped together and grouped and continuously called, you know, bad behaved and amounting to nothing. And we know about the self-fulfilling prophecy, and Ms. Mohammed she could chime in on that a little later on. And we continue to say this to them, not getting to the root cause. We're not a very psychologically minded society. So our first port of call will not to try and get help for the individual, but it will be to label. So it's not about, let's see what is the root cause. Can we get counseling for this young man? That's not the first place that we're at. We're at looking at the behavior and not looking at the root cause of the behavior, labeling them, putting them together and continuing to label them. And we're going through that cycle where they continue to try to live up to that name. This is what you say I am. Hey, so they say that I am, you know, that I can't behave, and that self-fulfilling prophecy comes in there. So that plays a very, very important part in that whole behavior and that categorizing of behaviors versus mental health, because we don't have them assessed. So how can we say if the behavior is due to a mental health issue or whether it's just due to a behavioral issue? Thank you.
Wow. I'm already seeing that we might have to do a part 2 on this, you know, because this flight is interesting. I want to hear from our youth representatives, and you all could talk some more to this.
Honestly, for me, with the labeling the youths as bad youths, I guess it comes from a lack of empathy, not being able to really step back, step out to yourself and put yourself in the next person's shoes to really find out, why is this person really like this? They don't just get up one day and say they want to be like this. There's certain things that happen, certain occurrences that happened before in their life that had them to act that way to protect themselves. They see it as protection. And when you really get to break someone's walls down and with one simple conversation, a valuable conversation, and get to know them, and you get to realize, no, this person really as what they perceived in the school or maybe outside there, certain ways that they will have to act to not be seen a certain type of way, and get to understand them. It really gives you a certain kind of perspective that not everybody is as their labels. So the power of a conversation goes a long way.
Indeed, the power of conversation. And that is why NIHERST and WRAPTT is having this conversation this evening. Brianna, what do you want to put forward in this conversation?
Thank you, Miss. I totally agree with what Miss Arlene and what David said. A lot of people went through things growing up. Some people still go through things that they don't speak about, and that contributes to their behavior in society. And labeling the individual or punishing them or bashing them is not a good way to deal with it. I feel like in situations like that where children are rebellious or disobedient, or they don't know how to just sit still in a setting, instead of labeling them or bashing them, be patient with them. Talk to them, take the time to find out, well, why are you like this? What's going on at home, X, Y, and Z. And some people don't open up easy. So that I said to be patient with them, but there's a issue, there's a reason why they act like this. And the only how you will know is if you ask. So yeah,
Wow.
that is my
I love
response
that.
to that.
I love that, because we are all domino blocks in a domino effect. And some of us may have gotten labeled from the area we come from, or even our parents, our relatives, and those we associate with. So I want to encourage you, the youth. The labeling starts and ends with you. You have the power to control that, and we want to be able to harness all of those things in this conversation. Ms. Johnson, you're here with us?
Yes, I am. I had some technical challenges since the quiz went up. It froze my screen, and I just had some challenges.
Too much fire, too much vibes. That's okay. I want to repeat your question. How can society address this bad behavior labeling? What can we do to heal rather than hurt?
Right. So the stigma we are speaking about, and the stigma that is attached to mental health illnesses, anything like that. And I heard one of the panelists before mention, we are not that kind of society that believe in lying down and speaking our problems and all of that. So culturally, we're not at that place quite yet. And therefore, we tend to label the person as being mad. Even if you look at learning disabilities, we label children as being dunce, because persons just don't want to accept that something may be genuinely wrong or going on with a child. And by assessing that child and getting help for that child, you will actually be doing a lot more good. But because we are so stuck in our own taboo about mental health and these issues, we go around as a society labeling, and therefore if I feel a way, or if I think something is wrong with me, I will think twice to go get help or to speak to somebody about it, because culturally we are small as well. So I go to Dr. Spence, or I go to some doctor or Dr. Mohammed, and then I feel when I see any grocery with somebody that is one of my clients, that person has an issue. So we go through that anxiety or that fear as well. And I think that stigma is a societal response that needs to change with each and every one of us. Right? We have to change that stigma by addressing our own view of how we view mental illness, how we view our own mental health. So only when we as individuals, meaning the young, the old, the male, the female, the professionals, the non-professionals, we all have to now take our view of how we see mental health and mental wellness into real account, and see if we too stigmatize the issue, making it difficult for persons to seek support or seek help. Right now, remember I say, well, I come from the social work aspect of it, where we're here to support and to make sure that persons are equipped enough to cope with whatever social issues that may be hindering their progress as an individual or their daily functioning. But I just want to share one quote. We need to be dedicated to the change in the way in which people see mental illness at all levels of society. And if not for ourselves, we have to advocate for those who are struggling in silence. We need to help. And we need to get rid of the stigma that attach, and we need to start with ourselves. That's my view on it.
Indeed, I agree. In order for us we need to change our view so we could review the situation. And this happens through re-education. So we're gonna pull the curtains down in a bit. It's been quite an adventure and a lot of good information. I hope you all are taking notes on this. I want to address the second to last question to Ms. Mohammed and Dr. Spence, right? And then right after that, let me give everybody the final question so that I don't have to show back up here again and take more time. So the final question is what I like to call the positivity pot. So the final question is, what would you add to the positivity pot of what you would like to see more happening in our society to address this mental health issue post-pandemic? right? So I hope that was clear. So get ready. I give you all a heads up to think, okay? So this question, I want to talk about diagnosis, and I want to put 3 question marks behind it. So Ms. Mohammed and Dr. Spence, could you address this in 30 seconds each? Could you tell us, I know it's a lot to unpack, but diagnosis, where do we go? How do we start? The importance and the role of diagnosis in this whole thing.
First things first, not to Google. So don't Google. I mean, you can, but use Google for information and to guide, but do not use Google as that point of entry where, you know, persons, they come to you already and say, you know what, I think I have this, I have that, and I have that. And I'm like, wait, hold up, let's figure it out together. So first things first, when it comes to diagnosis, open your awareness to information. I think also when dealing with diagnosis, you want to be, again, mindful of that critical point of labeling and how detrimental labeling can be for persons, and how that can put persons off from even wanting to reach out and get help. Because obviously, if I have a diagnosis, I am going to be labeled a particular way. I'm going to be seen a particular way. And it's important for persons to understand, just because you have a mental illness does not mean that you have poor mental health, and vice versa. So when it comes to, if you notice you're having a challenge, if you observe someone is having a challenge, look for the patterns, look for the frequency, look for the duration in terms of how it is affecting that person, and then provide support. Don't go in terms of, you know, the name calling and the shaming, but offer support in terms of, hey, I noticed something is happening. Maybe you want to reach out to a professional for help. And so just as how you would have 999 and all the emergency numbers there, make sure that you have a toolkit on hand of those mental health professional, NGOs, community resources persons can go to get help if and when needed. So that's so important when it comes to diagnosis. And I know I went over 30 seconds.
That's okay. That's okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Mohammed. Dr. Spence,
So
all over to you.
2 things I wanted to say is, one, confidentiality is very important. And somebody spoke about, you know, I think it's the social worker spoke about persons sharing information, you know, this one came by me. But persons, when they diagnose and they hear or from somebody else, you know, she have so-and-so, that turns them off in terms of going for treatment. So I think one of the key things we have to understand is confidentiality for practitioners. The second thing I want to say is that, listen, if you have any problem in terms of your diagnosis of the problem, please go to a professional for help, and not let the friend and the cousin and the auntie give you information. Get it from professionals, right? So seek professionals, and I don't want to go over the time. That's 2 key things I wanted to say. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. So we need to seek the specialists and stop the stigma. 2 S's that we need to drop there. So this is an opportunity for our participants to engage in our last question, what I like to call the pot of positivity. What would you like to see more of in our society to address this issue? And of course, while you are dropping your comments in the chat, we want to start off with, you know, Bailey, I'm coming at you. I like to pick on you. We're going to start with you. What are some of the positive interventions? One positive intervention, call somebody name after so that they can share their positive intervention as well.
I would love to see more young men coming and expressing how they feel, you know, and not having it feel like a joke thing and having your brethren like clown your foot, you know. Just express how you feel, get out there, and we get solutions. So the solutions for your brethren, you never know. I would love to hear Shireen.
Nice. Thank you so much. I would love to see more compassion. I think, you know, as a society, persons are so quick to judge, so quick to label. And I always tell my clients, don't be too quick to put a full stop when it comes to your problems. Be open to putting a comma. Give yourself space. And so when people are dealing with challenges too, give them some space in terms of compassion, in terms of support, in terms of reaching out, in terms of how you respond to persons. So I would love to see more compassion when it comes to mental health, because it must be normalized. Just as you would go to the doctor for a chest pain or a broken hand, it's okay if you are going to a mental health professional if you're struggling to get out of bed, or you know, you had a breakup and you have a tabanka. All of those things are okay. It's part of life, and life is living. Oh, I would like to pass it on to Ms. Hamblin Paul.
education and awareness. I believe it is important for us to continue, us as in here today, to continue that drive towards education and awareness. If our society becomes more aware and educated, I believe the whole issue of mental health will be handled differently. Knowledge is power.
We're going to pass it on to
Miss Johnson.
Ms. Johnson.
Thank you. And I'm glad you passed it on to me because I'm thinking of inclusivity. And I'm talking about inclusiveness in education, in communities, and society, where when we include, or we have inclusiveness within the education system, where we're talking with the youth, we could get rid of that stigma associated with mental health, learning disabilities, all of that. So I'm thinking a more inclusive society, an inclusive education system, an inclusive community, just let everybody feel a part of, and I think it will get rid of the stigma when we see each other as individuals that comes with a purpose, that comes with strengths, that come with challenges, and we include them into everything. I think we heading into a correct direction once we include everybody. So inclusiveness for me, that's my add to the pot.
And who you want to stir this pot? Pass the pot spoon to somebody else.
Okay, I'll be passing it on to Mr. LaRose.
Mr. LaRose, the pot
Yes,
spoon is
Judy.
yours.
My positive spin is to ensure, I'm not dealing with the youth, but the adults, to access courses, seminars like these, where they can learn to be better mentors to the students, and my party, the boys in their charge. For example, I did a game yesterday, I refereed a game yesterday, and some of the words that were being used by the adults around the game. And on a 15 games, I'm dealing with 13, 12, 14, 15-year-olds on a 15 game. And the comments that were made by adults who were in charge of some of these children left a lot to be desired. So I will encourage those who are in positions of trust, teachers, coaches, trainers, to take time to learn about your role, because your role is very critical. Some children, you are their parents, you are their uncle, you are their godfather, you are their amateur counselor, you are their confidant. Learn to take that role seriously, do the courses. I remember for sport, there's one called Safeguarding, how to deal with youth and how to protect youth in a sporting environment. These are the things I would like to see going forward. Let us be involved as the ones with the trust and care. Let us be involved in terms of getting those courses, getting those seminars, and hopefully more like these where they can learn and grow together.
Okay, you're passing the pot spoon to who? You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I'm passing the pot spoon to Dr. Spence.
So I have two things to put into the pot. Am I muted? No, I'm not.
No, I hear you.
Yes, I have two things to add to the pot. That is practice self-care. I tell my clients that every day. I tell my students that practice self-care. Do a spa, do something for you, practice self-care. The second thing is focus on what you have control over. We worry about things that we have no control over. And we have to start focusing on what we can control. And so that's two things I want to leave you all with. Practice self-care and focus on what you have control over. Thank you very much.
Who you passing the pot spoon to?
Oh.
I think Brianna didn't get to go as yet, not so?
All right, so Brianna. Brianna?
Thank you, Miss. My suggestion would be to pray or encourage people to pray. I feel like most people undermine or forget the power that God has. No issue or no situation is too big for God to handle. And only without God, we are nothing. So only God can help us. Only God can get rid of whatever the issue is. So my suggestion, I am encouraging people to pray, have faith in God, whatever it is, take it to the Lord and pray. So that is my contribution to the pot, and I'm passing it to,
I believe everybody went.
Everybody went already?
Yes, so I'm going to take this from you, and I'm going to stir it up and give it a little taste. A little hot, hold on. That tastes good to me. I am suggesting that NIHERST and WRAPTT have a summer camp around this, but no pressure, no pressure. Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, youth, you were the focus tonight. We want to thank all our panelists, give them a virtual round of applause. It was informative, enlightening, what a discourse indeed. And we just want to circle back to hear Ms. McLean's message. So our IT personnel, let's get that up on the screen at this moment in time.
Good day. Thank you for being here today. Today, we come together to encourage you and support you, our youth, to let you know that you are not alone. Depression is a real illness and not one to be taken lightly or to be ashamed of. Depression affects many around the world. It is reported that approximately 28% of the world's population is affected by mental health illness. That means at least 1 in 4 people are affected by depression or anxiety. As mental health continues to be a pressing issue around the world, from traditional media to social media, people and countries are stepping up to educate and destigmatize mental illnesses. And this holds true for Trinidad and Tobago. In 2022, it was reported that there was a gradual increase in the suicidal rate. WRAPTT takes this seriously and would like to reverse that trend. We believe in taking a comprehensive approach to mental health illness by increasing funding for mental health services, greater awareness and education, and providing a more supportive social environment, particularly for our youth. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge NIHERST, led by Mrs. Lord Lewis, for the great work that they are doing for our nation's youth by fostering innovation, creativity, and addressing their well-being. Our collaboration today is a special one, as it sheds light into mental health challenges that our young people face and hopes to provide you with tools to support you. By working together, we can ensure that you, the youth in our community, has access to resources and the support needed in times of need to ensure that you have good mental health and well-being. On behalf of WRAPTT, we would like to thank you for taking the time to address your mental health. And we hope that this event brings you much comfort, provides you with tools and resources, and assures you that you are not alone. Thank you.
Wow, wow. I believe that video needed to be right there. There was a reason why there was a technical difficulty at the beginning. Thank you so much, Ms. McLean, for that message. So timely. And somebody said the word feedback. We cannot improve unless we hear back from you. You need to feed us the information. So the T in youth is to teach us. So if you look in the comment section, you would see a link to a feedback form. It is very important that you fill it out. Take a couple of minutes to fill it out. Trust me, it will be shorter than you making a call to any fast food restaurant to get food. Just do the feedback link and we will be happy that you filled it out. So ladies and gentlemen, this brings us to the official end of our event. Thank you for coming. But before we depart, we would like to invite Ms. Avril Phillips Bernard to deliver thanks on behalf of the collaborating bodies. It was a pleasure flying on this flight with you. My name is Candice Marie Andrews, the host with the most, and I'll turn it over to Ms. Phillips Bernard at this moment to do the vote of thanks. Ms. Bernard, you're muted. We want that energy heard. Okay, let's see if our tech team could unmute you, because
I'm on mute. Can you hear me now?
great, you go right ahead.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Candice, and good evening, everyone. Now, as we inch beyond COVID-19, as we heard this evening, we saw a sharp increase in mental health issues among our youth. Many of our youth have experienced losses, including the loss of friends and family members, together with the loss of opportunities to socialize and to build the necessary coping skills necessary for successfully navigating life. This evening's event was a very valuable step forward in helping our youth to get back on track. A much needed discussion was started, and solutions and strategies were discussed, and a toolkit of actionable resources will be made available to each attendee. I love that this conversation was filled with hope. So, thank you to our esteemed panelists and moderator for taking the time to be here this evening and to share your wisdom with us. Thank you to all those who participated by making this discussion interactive. Thank you. Thank you to all those who worked behind the scenes. There were many who we did not see tonight, who put things together, who contributed towards the effectiveness of this evening's discussion. Thank you, Mrs. Lord Lewis and Mrs. McLean, for being visionary leaders who inspire us all to do good. By this time next year, as we prepare for Power Youth 2024, we want to be able to say that our youth are on the mend and thriving. Thank you once again. Have a wonderful evening.